I love manga. It's my favorite form of media, and it's something I've been very vocal about loving for a long time. If you have any experience with me or my channel, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of shonen manga, specifically the manga within Weekly Shonen Jump, and with all the videos I make about it and its history, I've had less and less time to read things outside of it. It's not that I dislike other manga, I'm just in love with Jump as a publication, and a lot of the manga within it specifically, but as I said, I do love manga period, and I've noticed I haven't read all that much shoujo manga in particular, partly because of my Jump obsession, but probably due to certain biases related to its demographic as well. In the last few years, I've seen a lot of vocal people speak about shoujo manga and push it, pushing people to try and read it, and it's definitely got me more intrigued, but also sometimes they've pushed me away. There's this us versus them mentality sometimes between shoujo and shonen manga that has understandably put me off from really delving into anything shoujo related, but I don't think that's wholly fair. There's plenty of very passionate voices calling for people to be open-minded and to try something new, so why not focus on them instead? Which is what I like doing with shonen manga anyway, trying to dispel preconceptions of what a demographic is and showing people that there's so much more to shonen than what's on the surface, and that could also be done with shoujo manga too. Granted, I won't be able to tackle it with the same degree as I can with Jump. I've essentially spec'd my entire character in Jump manga, but what I can do with that is, as a huge shonen fan, give you my thoughts and opinions on a bunch of shoujo manga. I might be able to show other big shonen fans that, hey, actually there's a lot of cool stuff here that you may like that isn't too dissimilar to your favorite big battle shonen. To do this, a while back I asked a lot of people on Twitter to give me recommendations for shoujo manga to read, and I received a ton. I ended up picking 10 manga in total, and I read 3 volumes of each, or as much as they had. Reading every single recommendation to its conclusion would have been a really big effort on my part and likely would consume my entire life, so I opted to just get a taste of 10 different manga, which at the end of the day is still 30 or so volumes. When selecting what to read, I thought of trying a mix of genres, sizes, and time periods, since I'm not averse to trying classics by any means. Maybe you'll think my selection is odd for not including some of the biggest classics, like Fruits Basket, but 1, I've seen all the anime of Fruits Basket and I love it to bits, and 2, there's so much more than just the very biggest of the demographic, and I wanted to maybe highlight some smaller or weirder picks alongside some classics, of course. So, with all of that out of the way, let's dive into the first shoujo manga of the video, and one that instantly destroyed all preconceptions of what a shoujo manga was for me. Ôoku, The Inner Chambers. Ôoku is this feudal political drama manga set in the Edo period in the shogun's inner palace, where you would usually find a bunch of beautiful courtesans doing various tasks to please their lord. In me saying this, the image that will likely come to mind will be of a lot of beautiful women wandering the palace, whereas Ôoku takes place in an alternate history where a contagion called the Red-Face Pox has hit Japan and it's decimated the male population exclusively, ravaging the country in all sorts of social, economic, and political ways. This places men in new and interesting positions, including being the new courtesans of the inner chambers. Men are now scarce and valuable, many are not allowed to go out to work, never mind fight, and some sell their bodies as a luxury commodity. Families lie broken, losing their fathers and sons. Traditions die overnight, and fields begin to decay as not enough people are left to work on them. Ôoku is a manga not for the faint of heart. It's dark, and when I say that, I truly mean it. It's a work shrouded in a malaise that deepens as you read more, and it tackles a lot of sensitive topics, so if you can't handle heavier subject matters, including sexual abuse, I'd maybe skip to the next manga in the video. There's timestamps in the description. With that said, Ôoku does not shy away from the grittiness that is often present in more historical stories like this. Think of shows like Game of Thrones or Shogun. They're very vanilla examples, but ones people will recognize, and while Ôoku isn't exactly like these, you will see the same level of political chicanery as well as darker elements. There are a fair number of rape or attempted rape scenes early on, usually male on male, and they really caught me off guard. These scenes of famine depicted were also genuinely upsetting, but it also stabs you right in the heart with some of its more emotional moments. Everyone in Ôoku seems to be suffering. It's difficult for everyone in this great time of change, where roles assigned to sex or gender are given to another. You see this in various leadership figures, the aristocracy and the average person, but it's in these interlacing tragedies that flecks of humanity and love shine through. Usually very, very briefly, but it makes them really special, and I'm sure over its 19-volume run, things will get better with time. The artwork is subdued but beautiful. Characters and backgrounds are drawn simply, but they're sturdy. Well drawn, and all the perspective and anatomy has a sense of realism, which I think fits the story perfectly due to it being historical. It also adds to the tragedy of what's happening because it feels a lot more real and less fantastical. The characters specifically in this style are great because both males and females look quite similar, enhancing Ôoku's messaging and theming as it explores the idea of gender, but these subtle differences in characters say a lot with different facial structures and eye shapes sometimes, revealing a bit more about any given character. I also just love how it lets men be beautiful. Male courtesans, from my understanding, did exist in various cultures. People have always yearned for pretty boys, but I like how much of a focus it is in Ôoku. I do feel like it tackles different positive and negative aspects of how beauty is defined and used, but generally I'm quite happy when a piece of media tackles anything regarding this that's outside of the norm, so it got me especially excited. As a manga, Ôoku is also very wordy. Its 19 volumes might as well be much more, as pages are often novelesque and rich with text. But it's not all padding. There's a lot of world and character building told to you, which left me feeling like I had read 10 volumes by the end and not 3. From my understanding, it also might hop time periods and characters, giving you a full historic saga that explores the ramifications of the red-faced pox and the changes it's caused in Japan. It's a manga I would love to read more of in the future, as its setting is enthralling and its characters' journeys had me in tears reading their stories. It's definitely not for everyone though. I'd say Ôoku is a very painful manga, but if you like the sound of its unique world and how it plays with expected gender norms, or if you just want to cry, I think it's a wonderful and worthwhile read. In regards to comparing it to shonen manga, you seldom get drama this robust and real feeling. It isn't afraid to let you bask in its tragedy either, and it rarely interrupts its dramatic moments for jokes. I don't think it holds much in common with any shonen manga I've read, to be honest, and is more serious than a lot of seinen manga I've read. So this is one I'd maybe recommend if you generally like drama or historical stories filled with tragedy. Next up we have something a lot lighter, which was recommended by fellow mangatuber Bunko Bun. I'm of course talking about Mr. Paperbag is in Love, which they've talked about before on their channel, and it's a really nice, short but sweet read, even coming under the 3-volume rule I set, which makes it perfect to tackle after the heaviness that was Ôoku. Mr. Paperbag is a bit closer to what you typically think of when shoujo is brought up. It's a short, romantic slice of life work that sees the shy titular Paperbag-kun gradually get closer with the person he admires named Umi. It does verge on him being a stalker at the beginning, although it becomes quickly apparent that Paperbag is just super shy and super in love. While this dialed down the realism levels a lot for me, I found it a very pleasant read. It really feels like you're eating a bag of sweets because it mostly concerns the two characters just having fun in a whimsical and light-hearted way. The art overall is serviceable. I really like how Umi is drawn specifically though. She has a sharpness to her design, which is a big contrast to her kind and bubbly personality. The backgrounds and other elements of art weren't much to write home about though, especially when we compare it to some of the other manga on this list. It also bugged me a bit with certain tropes being used, like childhood lovers meeting again. It's something I've seen a ton of, and it didn't really do anything for me here, but overall it was a nice, simple but sweet read, and I'd recommend it to anyone else who might be looking for just that. Art style Otherwise, this one definitely differs from most shonen manga, and you see some shoujo flourishes shine through here in its use of effects and screen tones, but the overall romance is something I didn't find too dissimilar from some of the shonen ones, especially something like Blue Box. Oniisama A, or Dear Brother, is a shoujo classic from 1974 by renowned author Ryoko Ikeda. It's short, coming in at just 3 volumes, and I was not prepared for the sheer beauty and insanity that it had to offer. Again, like Ôoku, I feel like I need to warn people with this one since it deals with heavy topics like drug addiction, self-harm, and suicide, which you probably wouldn't have guessed from the gorgeous art and school setting. Oniisama A follows Nanako, a girl joining a prestigious private all-girls school, and her association with the sorority there. She is a very plain and normal girl, which earns her much disdain from her peers when she's chosen to join the school sorority, which is a very exclusive club consisting of only the most refined of ladies. She garners the attention of many upperclassmen who run the club, further ostracizing her from most of the school as they hate her being the subject of their affections. These girls, in particular Rei and Kaoru, are very boyish to an extent, and I thought some of them might be cross-dressing, but it turns out they're not male at all, which I find very interesting. The breadth of femininity on display really wowed me, and for only being 3 volumes long, a lot of these characters are explored in depth and most are quite tragic individuals. Oniisama A has this manic, dreamlike feel to it, which combined with the gorgeous artwork that's often wild, filled with beautiful characters, contrasted by shocked expressions and framing I would more attribute to a horror manga, this then made me think of Italian giallo films, a subgenre I don't have the most familiarity with, but I think they share much in common with Oniisama A. Think of Suspiria or Phenomena. The focus on beauty, of having a more erratic art style, the focusing on more feminine horror and concepts, as well as the girls-only school setting, all come together to make something that could be right out of Suspiria especially. The tragedy of Oniisama A also feeds into this, making it a visceral and emotional experience that I struggle to put down, and sometimes to fully understand since it was so lightning fast. I really enjoyed my time with it and was impressed by the breadth of ideas it was trying to explore, like drug addiction, depression, and there's quite a lot of same-sex relations going on between the girls too, and I wouldn't have expected that from a 70s shoujo manga, but I'm definitely interested in seeing what else is out there now. This, from my exploration of Weekly Shonen Jump's history, is nothing like old shonen manga I've read, which, despite being pretty wild sometimes, hasn't been nearly as crazy as Oniisama A. Some do present ideas and explore topics that feel slightly ahead of its time though. Again, I want to bring up something like Stop Hibari-kun, which explores gender identity through its transgender protagonist. Perhaps there was still a stigma around some of these topics, but people still felt it was worthwhile to explore them back then, no matter the demographic, and I think that's very cool, be it shoujo or shonen manga. Champignon no Majo, or The Mushroom Witch, is the only manga on this list that's currently still ongoing, and one I'd never heard of before planning to make this video. The premise though of a quiet little witch who grows mushrooms and medicines in the middle of a forest drew me in, along with its storybook-esque style artwork. It's initially very cute, inoffensive, and warming, especially with all its illustrations. I particularly like the bonus ones you find of the witch's house. I've always liked little diagrams like this of where the characters might live, and again, it extends to that fairy tale storybook type of vibe. It also gradually builds this pretty nice fantasy world as you see Luna the witch go through her day-to-day life, and she is also explored quite a lot too, being a very lonely figure, unable to go anywhere without spawning these mushrooms which are full of poison, and should anyone touch them or even her herself, they will die. She is fated seemingly to be alone and untouchable. So, seeing her gradually find companionship throughout the story is nice, and the plot opens up majorly come chapter 9, with the manga shifts to adding a second protagonist. I won't spoil too much since this is one of the newest and likely least read manga on this list, but if you'd like a relaxing but sweet fantasy work that takes its time to establish its world and plot, then The Mushroom Witch might be worth a read. Its tone is much softer than most shonen manga I've read, but certain elements like the introduction of a witch coven full of quirky characters did remind me of some of the big groups you'd see in shonen battle manga, like the Hashira from Demon Slayer or the Gote 13 from Bleach. Shonen manga has its fair share of slice of life manga too, like with Magu-chan, which all the little animals under Luna's care reminded me a bit of too. Like a Butterfly is a romance slice of life manga that's fairly well known and liked, although I don't think it's quite as discussed as some of the bigger ones, and it came out in the early 2010s, so I thought it would make for an interesting pick to try to read. The cover art also drew me in with these soft pastel colors and pretty characters. Overall, I found this cute, but I'm not sure it's my thing. I felt the relationship and plot meandered a lot at the beginning, and I just didn't click with the two main characters or their romance. They're kind of just frustrating to me. I think I'm generally a pretty shy and quiet person, but still couldn't connect with either character, who are both shy and very quiet. The more standard school rom-com events that happen didn't engage me either. School festivals, sports matches, and summer fireworks have to be really good to intrigue me, and this just didn't do it. Coupled with some pretty basic art and compositions, and it left me very unimpressed overall. It has nice character illustrations, and I think I can understand the appeal, but this one just was not for me. Children of the Whales is a manga I've been interested in for quite a long time, ever since seeing some of the anime when it aired way back in 2017. It's this beautiful looking fantasy adventure manga that really defies the typical association of what shoujo manga might be to a lot of people. Following Chakuro on this big ship called the Mud Whale, he archives the history of the boat and all of its inhabitants who drift on a sea of endless sand, picking up scraps and living peaceful day-to-day lives. There's also a magical component, with most people on the whale being able to wield thymia at the cost of greatly reducing their lifespan, which helps introduce all sorts of interesting thematic elements early on regarding life and death. Things are suddenly upended though when Chakura finds a girl named Lycos, who is not a part of the Mud Whale, and others soon follow. Children of the Whales sets up this extremely unique fantasy world with rich ideas, likable characters, and several mysteries about all of this that makes it enthralling to read. You want to know the secrets of the Mud Whale and the world at large after reading a few volumes, and you want to see what happens to the characters as well, because in the 3 volumes I've read, they've made them all very sympathetic and likable. Combine this with the harsh world they've been placed in, which could easily see any of them dead through the many brutal fights the characters are involved in, and you get this thrilling epic in the making, which reminds me a lot of young adult books I'd read when I was younger, seeing children rise up against something far greater than themselves, except this is much better written and has this extremely cool fantasy world backed behind it with some gorgeous artwork. And while I've been yapping, I've been showing off that artwork, and it's so detailed, soft, and has this alien quality to it that really draws you into the world itself. The characters are pretty, the backgrounds make you want to explore them, and the covers are so vibrant, they retroactively make me think the whole manga is in color, if that makes any sense to you. Children of the Whales is an incredibly beautiful manga that also has some of the best first few volumes I've read, and I'd love to read more eventually, and I'd urge anyone who hasn't read it yet to try it out. This is one in particular I think shonen fans would appreciate, with it having a bit of everything, with its world, mystery, and fights being big highlights. I do find there is an overall seriousness to Children of the Whales, which is a lot more engrossing than a lot of shonen manga. I'd actually compare it to more reading a fantasy book than a manga, so maybe highlighting something like Frieren is a good comparison, both being fantasy manga that take a more contemplative stance, having beautiful art, and they also take a lot of time to dive deep into their worlds and how they work. Kimi ni Todoke may be the biggest and most beloved shoujo manga on this list, and any Undead Unluck fans might recognize it since the manga Fuka reads is based on it, with its English name being From Me to You and the Undead Unluck version being To You From Me. This manga follows Sawako, who is often referred to as Sadako from The Ring due to her long hair and generally silent and creepy attitude, but she's actually a very misunderstood person, wanting to reach out and make friends but being too shy to properly communicate that. Kimi ni Todoke gripped me a bit more than Like a Butterfly, with its characters being a lot stronger and more relatable. I really dig Sawako and her interpersonal relationships with others. She really wants connection but is equally scared of hurting others and ruining them socially. Her relationship with Shota is very sincere and develops nicely too, and I loved what I saw of these side characters like Yono and Yoshida. I found it had a good balance of romance, silly gag elements and drama, and overall it had some nice art too, using a lot of the more typical screen tones, glowing particles and flair you'd see from shoujo romance manga. Maybe it just isn't the right time in my life for romance manga like this, or perhaps I'm not a huge fan of manga like this in general, because while I can respect Kimi ni Todoke and its individual elements, it didn't fully grab me like other manga on this list. Though if the general premise sounds interesting, or if you'd like to read a modern shoujo classic that's quite long, I definitely say Kimi ni Todoke is worth a try. Going back to the 70s, we have Sukeban Deka, which I think anyone who's enjoyed my History of Shonen Jump videos would really enjoy, as this feels right at home beside a lot of older Shonen Jump manga I've covered there. Sukeban Deka is about a girl called Saki, a delinquent who ends up busting out of juvie only to become a secret undercover detective working with the police to investigate crimes that usually involve other children. Equipped with her trusty metal yo-yo, she fights other delinquents and solves mysteries to free her own mother from prison, and the first few volumes take you through a few different arcs, most notably the one with the Mizuchi sisters, 3 siblings who belong to the same rich father who were equally as depraved, and I was not prepared for how dark Sukeban Deka would get, killing off characters right and left in horrible ways, as well as straight up massacring whole groups of children at points. The villain's Saki faces aren't pushovers, and there's a lot of weight on her shoulders to solve these mysteries and save as many people as possible. Saki herself is also just a cool character. She's strong-willed, charming, but her emotions shine through a lot, with her helping others and doing the right thing despite being surrounded by corrupt classmates, officials, and other antagonists. Her distrust of the police and the systems that have failed her and her mother is also something that shines for me too. She's in this really unfair and pretty horrible situation where if she doesn't cooperate, her mother will get executed, and I have no idea where the story will eventually go, but it has me hooked. The artwork by Shinji Wada is also phenomenal. The characters have crisp designs and the action and paneling elements are fun, with it really feeling no different from any shonen battle manga of the period. And honestly, it exceeds many of them in my opinion, being refreshingly brutal and emotional, which gives way to some great character exploration in Saki. I think everyone should try Sukeban Deka, but especially anyone familiar with Jump and older Jump manga, since I know a portion of my audience will be. It's so much fun and juggles its action and mystery elements perfectly, and I cannot wait to read it all someday. Next up we have Magical Knight Rayearth, coming in at 3 volumes, so I got to read the complete story, and this is yet another older manga coming out in 1993 by none other than Clamp. Rayearth, like Sukeban Deka, is another manga that incorporates heavy action elements into its story, and thus I think it's one any shonen battle fan might also enjoy, but that's not all it is. It mixes so many different ideas and genres like fantasy, isekai, magical girls, and mecha to create this really charming amalgamation that works perfectly. This is in large part due to its fantastic artwork. Every character pops, their designs are immaculate, and I love all of their goofy expressions. This also extends to the action scenes, which land with a lot of impact but also beauty. The elemental effects of all 3 magic knights always look great and graceful. Rayearth ultimately is a pretty simple story following these 3 girls, Hikaru, Umi, and Fu, all from different schools who have never met before, and then they find themselves transported to a different world and they quickly befriend each other. They're tasked to save this land named Sephiroth by rescuing the Princess Emerald, and to do so they must go on an adventure, learn magic, overcome their inner demons, and gain powerful weapons. It's something quite formulaic, but it's executed really well, and Rayearth ends up shining most with its characters and their developing friendship with each other, which by the end really hit me emotionally. This is another one I dare not say more about since it's so short, and I think everyone should give it a read. It has a bit of everything, and overall it's just a very solid short manga. And our final manga I'll be discussing today is Vampire Knight, something I have a bit of a history with as a fan of the anime, and I'll be honest here and say I like it in a cringe kind of way. The dub makes it unintentionally hilarious, and its over-dramatic plotlines are very fun to follow. The manga though, without the voices and with some spectacular art, nails a completely different mood for me, which took me by surprise. I'm a massive fan of vampires and vampire media overall, and know full well that they can be very hit or miss. Vampire Knight as a manga though has this sensual and gothic undertone to it, which accentuates the overdramatic aspect to a degree where I think it fits really well. The story primarily follows three characters, Yuki, Zero, and Kaname, who all attend Cross Academy, which is split between the day class of humans and the night class full of vampires. The existence of vampires is kept secret, but there's the intent of making the two species eventually coexist, which opens up a whole political side to the series, which I felt I could dig into a bit more with the manga. Vampire Knight is also a romance series that presents a love triangle with both Zero and Kaname being potential interests for Yuki, and this is something I found quite well done within the first 3 volumes. Kaname is the domineering and solid pretty boy who knows exactly what he wants and leads the night class as a pure-blooded vampire. He also has a history with Yuki, giving them a deeper relationship than most other characters. But Zero, despite knowing Yuki for less time, has grown up with her and is more casual, less persistent, and holds Yuki at arm's length as to not hurt her. He's rude and brash, but also a little puppy that needs taking care of sometimes, which Yuki always seems to want to do. And what's more, Zero is a vampire hunter, making this love triangle all the more juicy, and it just keeps getting more messy and indulgent as the manga progresses. What I also like is all 3 have some kind of deep trauma more or less relating to vampires, which adds to the angst the series projects, but it's also understandable why each one would seek comfort in each other. Vampire Knight then supplements this main love triangle with various other side plots and mysteries concerning vampire politics and backstories, which slowly grows a lovable cast of other vampires. Action, horror, and gag elements also are sprinkled throughout too, so it's never boring, and having watched the show and having a preconception that Vampire Knight is very over the top and silly, I really enjoyed reading these 3 volumes, and my takeaway for now is that it's pretty damn good and a lot better than the anime. While I don't think the action elements would entice shonen manga fans like the other titles on this list, if the general plot and the idea of an angsty vampire-centric romance sounds at all appealing, I would heavily recommend Vampire Knight, maybe with the disclaimer that there's the possibility that things will get very off the rails and weird later on. Also, having recently read Video Girl I think that the melodrama Vampire Knight presents is something fans of romance manga generally might like. Yuki's back and forth between the 2 boys might stimulate the same feelings as a harem protagonist bouncing around between different girls, especially if you like over-the-top drama. Sometimes it's what we all yearn for, and it's not exclusive to any given demographic. And those were the 10 manga I read. Some I enjoyed a ton, and others I probably won't read any more of. But what exactly can I draw from this experience and this vacation to Shoujo Island? To be completely honest, I think I got what I expected, although I enjoyed a lot more than I thought too. I'm fully aware that manga demographics are not bound to specific genres and traits. They're usually stereotyped for a reason, but it's dangerous to do that all the time because there's always exceptions, and quite often there's a lot of exceptions. All shoujo manga are not romance manga. All shoujo manga do not use the same overabundance of screen tones and glittery effects. It's the same with shonen, and people thinking is all battle manga. It's the same ideas and argument, just presented in a different package. But from reading all of this, I can also ascertain that there's a lot of quality manga that blurs these lines really well. Take Sukeban Deka or Rayearth, which do push a more feminine experience to the forefront, but are battle-centric and would fit into any shonen magazine. Perhaps their art styles are a bit girly, but so was Stop Hibari-kun or Cat's Eye from the early 80s, which were both Jump manga. You could swap what magazines these were all in quite easily, and I think the biggest thing they have in common are that they're all good manga and all have female protagonists. Furthermore, I want to point out Masumi Kurumada's works. Ring the Kakuro and Saint Seiya presented some very feminine art styles which filled their pages with pretty boys, yet are known to be some of the most pivotal battle shonen manga that helped define the subgenre. The biggest elephant in the room when confronting shoujo though is the romance aspect. A lot of the most popular ones are romance works, and this will definitely add to the perception that shoujo is sometimes synonymous with romance in general. You see this when people refer to things like Kaguya-sama as a shoujo, or even something like Blue Box from Jump. Granted, a majority of what we cover today were romance manga or had romantic elements, though if you look at something like Weekly Shonen Jump with the Mission Yozakura Family, Undead Unluck, and Witch Watch, these all have heavy romance elements as well. And then we have Blue Box and Himiten, which are just romance manga. Romance is just a very popular genre and subject matter. The majority of people know and understand love and want to explore it through media. To an extent, romance is just going to exist everywhere as it appeals to almost everyone. I will say though, the two biggest romance focused manga I read today were also the two I liked the least. Maybe it's just my general mood, or it's the tropes or presentation these two series had that I just did not vibe with. There's definitely something there though. Maybe I just don't like this particular brand of romance manga, since I know I do like romance generally. I like Ayakashi Triangle, which is a shonen ecchi manga. I love Umineko, which is an adaptation of a visual novel. I like Boy Likes Maria, which is a boys love manga. And One More Step, Come Stand By My Side is a seinen anthology with some romantic elements and romance stories. They're all very different, and so are Like a Butterfly and Kimi ni Todoke. Maybe I just need to read more of them, or more shoujo romance in general, or maybe I just don't like them, which is okay too. What wouldn't be okay though is if I blanketly said I don't like shoujo manga, because I'd be ignoring the other 8 I read today, which I found great value in all sorts of places, and I thoroughly enjoyed them too. I'd also be ignoring thousands of other shoujo manga which might all be amazing. There's plenty of people who wanted to recommend me the greats like Yona of the Dawn, Fruits Basket, Nana, or Banana Fish, as well as a whole host of other manga that could be absolutely brilliant. So to any big shonen fans out there who haven't read much shoujo, either just from happenstance or because you have these preconceptions of what shoujo manga might be like, maybe give something I've covered here a go. I tried to tackle a lot of different things with different lengths for a reason, because I'm sure something I cover today will sound interesting to most people. And to any fans of shoujo manga, thank you for being insistent and for loving what you love. Thank you for the recommendations and for being gentle in your approach. I will ask the same in reverse though. If you don't vibe with shonen manga, maybe check out something different. I have a few suggestions here of manga maybe you have not experienced, which differ slightly from the norm, which I think more people will enjoy and are outside the main demographic of shonen battle boy fighting manga. Akane Banashi is currently ongoing in Jump and is a manga about Rakugo, with a female protagonist that is absolutely brilliant. Ichi the Witch is a brand new Shonen Jump adventure manga written and drawn by a duo of 2 female mangaka about the sole male witch in a world full of female witches, which is fun and whimsical. Hikaru no Go is a bit of an older manga about the board game Go. It's a Jump classic and another one I think would be a good recommendation, as it has a stellar cast of characters and goes into a different direction than most shonen battle manga. And lastly, one that is a bit more of what you typically define as a shonen battle manga, we have Muyo and Roji's Bureau of Spiritual Investigation. This follows 2 little guys as they solve various problems by exorcising spirits and engaging in other spooky phenomena. It has a very unique art style, and I think it approaches the usual shonen exorcist formula very differently, so it's worth having a look. And I think with that, I just want to say, enjoy reading manga, period. Engage with new things, be open-minded, and don't close yourself off to an entire demographic or genre. If you've had a couple of bad experiences, just ask others genuinely instead for recommendations, and if you're on the other side of that, reply with your best possible answer. Share your favorite manga that's a shoujo or a romance or a shonen, and also vary what you share as well, and hopefully something clicks. Don't just share the same manga over and over, maybe share something that's a little bit different but still good, or something you think that person specifically might enjoy. Overall, this was a lot of fun to do as a little side project in between making videos on Shonen Jump manga, which if you're interested in, I have a ton of videos on Weekly Shonen Jump's history, as well as some of its more modern axed manga. I would be open to do something like this again in the future for other demographics like josei, or maybe individual genres at some point too, so subscribe and let me know in the comments if that's something you'd ever like to see. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It helps a ton and pushes me to make better videos. You'll also get some cool rewards like access to exclusive Axe File hauls, and you can listen to the Patreon-only Trent Talks podcast at any tier, where I talk about all sorts of other media and manga I've enjoyed over the course of each month. And you'll also be thanked at the end of my videos with you getting your own little doodle at the $3 tier, like Kinocha, Jade, Kaizoku Gairu, Soroquel Zero, Holly the Apothecary, Mayu, It's Fako, Yellowtail, Lace Loggett, Chris P. Bacon, Cho Henshin, Full Metal, Unquestionable, Weeby Boy, Wurzel, and also AB, Bako Draws, and Otaku Gamer X at the $1 tier. Thank you all so much for being patrons, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind and take care.